Coffee with Colin, and thank you for joining me. And a happy new year. It's the start of 2020, the start of the soaring 20s, and I'm very excited about it. 2019 was a good year for me. I hope it was for you, but I'm aware of some friends, and I'm sure there are many others out there who are quite happy to say good riddance to 2019 for whatever reason. And if that's the case for you, I am sorry that that is the case for you. However, it's time to start again. The wonderful thing about New Year's is it gives us an opportunity to recap and regroup and rethink where we're at and who we are and what we're about and where we're headed. And 2019 was a good year for me. Two significant events happened for me in 2019. Number one was I reconnected with a long-time friend, Pádraig O'Malley. Pádraig and I soldiered together back in 30 years ago, it would appear. And we reconnected in 2019, and from that a new venture called Arrowboard has been born, which is very exciting. Watch this space. And then the second thing of significance was I was honoured to be invited by Janie Lazar and Lottie Hearn to participate in TEDx Dunleary in October with a wonderful group, another 8 speakers, and privileged to have joined the ranks of TEDx speakers globally. So that was very exciting. And so I sit here in good stead as we enter the new decade. I'm very excited about where 2020 and the 20s, the soaring 20s, can take me and my friends. And I'd like to wish you all the very best for the soaring 20s. And of course the whole idea of TEDx is where we share ideas worth spreading. And over the New Year's we tend to toast each other, we tend to wish each other well and clink glasses and so on. And I put a particular post out over New Year's which showed a glass of champagne, and there was some champagne in it, but it wasn't full. And the question I asked was, is this glass half full or half empty? And of course all the positive people came back and said clearly it's half full. And but there are people out there who would see a glass that isn't quite full as half empty. The question I want to pose is, why is that and what can we do about it? And there are 2 stories that came to mind that I'd like to relate in relation to whether the glass is half full or half empty. And the first story I want to relate relates to a guy called Steve back in 1975. And Steve had an idea worth spreading. And he took it to another guy called Steve, and the other guy called Steve said, that is an idea worth spreading. And they took the idea to the company that the first Steve worked for. The company was Hewlett Packard, and they said, we've got this great idea, we think you should look at it. And Hewlett Packard said, forget about it lads, never going to work. And so the 2 Steves, Wozniak and Jobs, set up a little computer company called Apple. And of course Apple went on over the last 40 years to become the first ever $1 trillion company in the world. And at the time of recording this in early 2020, Apple is worth 1.15 trillion. That's 1,150 billion, right? Because they had an idea worth spreading. Poor old Hewlett Packard, relatively speaking, very poor at only a market valuation of 30 billion. God bless them. But 1,150 billion versus 30 billion, because the Hewlett Packard guys saw the glass as half empty. The 2 Steves saw the glass as half full and decided to do something with it. Happy days. And the second story relates to the early 1980s where another Steve, believe it or not, had this idea. And he decided he was going to make a movie. And in this movie, an alien was going to come to Earth. And he decided that he wanted a particular scene where the alien was going to land in a back garden, and he was going to be lured into this little boy's home and into this little boy's life by using a whole load of coloured sweets. And you know the scene. And the scene is from E.T., the extraterrestrial. Fabulous scene, fabulous movie. We all grew up with it. And in it you might remember that scene where Elliot uses little coloured sweets to lure E.T. into his house. And the rest, as they say, is history. But you see, here's the problem, right? Steven Spielberg saw the idea behind that scene. He saw that as the glass half full. He said, this is an idea that could really work. And he took the idea to a particular sweet manufacturer, the Mars Chocolate Company. And he said, I'd like to use your M&Ms in that scene. And the Mars executive said, no way, silly idea, that'll never work. And they poo-pooed it. Glass half empty as far as they were concerned. And Spielberg didn't give up. He said, grand. And he went off to Hershey's and he said, do you see those Reese's Pieces that you have, those coloured sweets? I'd like to use them in a movie. And Hershey said, great idea, glass half full there, Stephen, way with you. And Steven Spielberg used Hershey's Pieces. What happened? Nothing for Mars, right? Nothing for M&Ms. Hershey's Pieces. Millions of people went looking for Hershey's Pieces as a result of that scene in that silly little movie. And their sales, the Hershey's sales that year grew by 65%. Glass half full, glass half empty. It's the same glass all the time. It's filled to the same amount all the time. The only question is, how do you see it? Is it half full or is it half empty? And when I put this piece out over the new year and said, is this glass half full or half empty? 3 people came back and they said, it's refillable. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? So whether the glass is half full or half empty, folks, it's refillable. So whether the glass was half full or half empty for you in 2019, whether your glass was half full or empty right through the last decade, or indeed the early part of this millennium, it doesn't matter. Whether it's half full or half empty, the great news is you can refill it, and you can constantly refill it for the rest of your life. It's entirely up to you. So if you've got an idea worth spreading, well then spread it in 2020 and see where it leads. And if somebody tells you that'll never work, thank them for it and move on. Thanks for that, next. Thanks for that, next. If somebody tells you your idea will never work, well, it'll never work for them for sure, right? So consider them the Mars executives of the 1980s, consider them the Hewlett-Packard executives of the 1970s, and move on and bring your idea to enough people. If you bring your idea to enough people, chances are somebody will believe in it too. Or perhaps, as happened with myself and Porrick O'Malley, perhaps you'll bring an idea to the table and somebody else will add something to it, and all of a sudden, poof, magic happens. That's what you're looking for in 2020 and beyond. And I really wish every success in 2020. The most important thing you can take from this week's Coffee with Colin is the glass is neither half empty nor half full. It's refillable. And thank you for joining me for this week's Coffee with Colin. I hope and trust as ever you got something from it. Very importantly, please consider what's been shared here today and apply it into your thinking for this next week. And then equally as importantly, come back next week. We'll share another coffee together and I'll ruminate on some other aspect of life and business. Between now and then, get some great coffee for sure. Get some fresh air. Get some R&R. If you spend a lot of time with people, I recommend you spend some time alone. And conversely, if you spend too much time alone, I recommend you get out and meet some people. And then when the time is right, and only when the time is right, get your head back in the game, get organised for the week ahead, get stuck in, make next week count, bring your idea worth spreading to others, and I'll see you here this time next week for another Coffee with Colin. Slán. Oh, I love great coffee. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.